David Whitman sat alone in a corner booth at a quiet diner in downtown Atlanta, stirring the melting ice cubes in his lemonade as if the answer to all his problems was hidden somewhere at the bottom of the glass. The hum of muted conversation filled the air, and the smell of fried food clung to his flannel shirt. At 32, David looked like the kind of guy who had everything going for him. Successful career in tech, decent looks, a warm smile, but his eyes told another story. He was confused, frustrated, and frankly, emotionally drained. His confusion had one name: women. It wasn't that David didn't like women. He loved them. He respected them. But he couldn't seem to figure them out. Every time he thought he understood what a woman wanted, something shifted. The rules changed. Interest faded. Text slowed. Conversations became short. It always ended the same. Him left wondering what went wrong. "Dude, you're overthinking it," said his best friend Brian Carter, sliding into the booth across from him. Brian was the type of guy who made socializing look effortless. Laid back, confident, and always the center of attention without trying. Women seemed drawn to him in a way David couldn't understand. David offered a dry chuckle. "You always say that. But tell me this. Why do they say one thing and do another? Why do they test you, then get mad when you don't pass a test you didn't know was being given? Why does a woman go cold when everything seemed great the day before?" Brian leaned back, studying his friend. "You want the truth." David raised an eyebrow. "Please." Brian smiled. "Because you're listening to what they say, not what they feel." That sentence hung in the air for a second, more powerful than either man expected. It wasn't the kind of thing you read in dating forums or heard in cheesy YouTube pickup videos. It struck at something deeper. David looked puzzled. "What does that even mean?" Brian leaned forward. "Women are emotional creatures. That's not an insult, it's a fact. They feel before they think. They experience the world through intuition, emotion, and connection. So if you take what they say at face value, without understanding what they feel beneath the words, you'll always be confused." David thought about Alyssa, the last woman he dated. She was intelligent, passionate, and independent. At first she was all in, sending long texts, planning dates, talking about the future. Then, seemingly overnight, she became distant, cold. When he asked if something was wrong, she said, "I don't know. I just need space." And then she disappeared. "I did everything right," David said, almost to himself. "I treated her well, listened to her, supported her dreams." "That's the problem," Brian replied. "You treated her well. But were you feeling her?" David narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" Brian explained. "A woman doesn't want a checklist boyfriend. She doesn't want someone who just responds correctly. She wants a man who feels her energy, who leads with confidence, who doesn't break under emotional pressure. They test you because they want to feel your strength. Not just physical but emotional grounding. Women want to feel secure in your presence. Not because you say the right things, but because they can feel you're unfazed, centered, and solid." David was silent. That night he went home and thought deeply. He scrolled through old texts with Alyssa. There were moments when she seemed to be pulling away. Subtle ones. When she sent a cryptic message, he had tried to fix it with reassurance. When she hinted at something deeper, he gave surface-level logic. He had heard her words but missed her emotions. She hadn't needed his solutions. She needed his presence, his steady energy. Over the next few months, David dove deep into learning emotional intelligence. Not just the kind you read about in self-help books, but the real-world skill of being fully present, grounded, and aware of another person's emotional state without losing yourself. He started practicing mindfulness. He learned how to hold space for someone, to truly listen without trying to fix. And most importantly, he learned the value of being unshakable in his identity. Then he met Emily. They met at a bookstore, both reaching for the same copy of a rare photography book. She had a quiet confidence, a natural charm. They started talking and ended up grabbing coffee nearby. Over the next few weeks they went on long walks, shared playlists, exchanged stories. But something was different this time. One night, as they sat on a rooftop under string lights, Emily turned to him and said, "I don't know why, but I feel calm around you. Like I don't have to second-guess myself." David smiled. "That's because I'm not here to judge you or fix you. I'm just here to know you." Emily's eyes softened, and for the first time in years, David felt the connection he had been chasing, not one based on impressing or pursuing, but on mutual emotional safety. Later he realized that all along, women weren't confusing. They were just layered. They operated in a world of unspoken language, intuition, and energy. And men who didn't understand that, who only listened to words and not emotion, would always be a step behind. He also realized the truth Brian had shared with him that day wasn't just about women. It was about life, about leadership, about becoming the kind of person others could lean on, not because you had all the answers, but because you were steady through the storm. Years later, David became a mentor to younger men. Not a dating coach, not a life guru, just a guy who had been through the confusion and made it out the other side. He taught them to be grounded, emotionally present, and clear in who they were. He reminded them that women weren't meant to be decoded. They were meant to be felt. At one of his workshops, a young man raised his hand. "So, what's the one truth then? The thing that makes women not confusing anymore?" David smiled and said, "When you stop trying to figure her out and start feeling where she is, everything makes sense. Women don't want perfect men. They want emotionally present ones." And that was it. Not a trick. Not a game. Just presence. Emotional depth. Authenticity. Women weren't confusing. They were simply responding to how grounded or ungrounded a man was. And once David learned that truth, he never felt confused again.